marketing, branding, and a little graphic design work for musicians. But I wanted to spend more of my professional life on the creative side of things. And I actually went into the program hoping to pivot away from music, and actually spent most of my time in the program working on projects completely unrelated to music. The only thing that I knew I wanted to do coming out of the program was start a company. This felt like an opportunity to get kind of, weird on some ideas and maybe turn one of them into a company. Like I said, I did other projects, but I kept finding myself getting pulled back to my roots in music. Speaking of, after those initial conversations with Lorenzo, this was the first experiment in trying to visualize sound in 3D that Imran Nazarali, another GID student, and I created at Tsinghua University during the program. In this experiment, we had taken a 3D camera, some speakers, some LEDs controlled by an Arduino connected to Ableton music production software, and streamed the video feed to a VR headset. The only thing that we learned from this was that this is a terrible way to visualize sound. I kept the project, on the back burner for myself. And while in Singapore at NTU, I conceptualized the user flows for how I could see the system working, and then started building an animation to reflect the environment and behavior of the concept. When I came back to the UK, I showed the animation and concept to Arthur Karabot, who graduated a few years before me. He asked me how long it took to make my shitty 1-minute animation, and I told him it took a few weeks. And he said you could learn to build a prototype in Unity in the same amount of time it would take to make the full animation. I knew how to code a little bit. I'd done some relatively unsophisticated Arduino projects, but he was right. I took some of his time and expertise, as well as that of Sergi Capdevila, who I believe I saw on the attendees list. But I learned to code in C#. I built some stuff in Unity, and I made a prototype. The main takeaway here is that you'll be surprised at what you can accomplish, especially with the resources Imperial and RCA can provide for you if you ask for them. This time 2 years ago, Volta still wasn't even my final project yet. I was working on something entirely different, but I found myself working on Volta for about 6 hours a day, and my actual final project for only 2 or 3. And about a month and a half before final projects were due is when I switched. So, for me, what a takeaway is out of that is, just keep an eye on where your attention flows. Tangents can be a good thing. They can actually show you what you want to be doing. The point I knew that I was going to pursue Volta as a company was within the last few weeks of GID. I loved the experience, but it was at that point that the internal gratification of building a prototype was matched with external validation, and it made me realize that this could be a viable business. Dezeen had been one of my favorite design blogs for years, so this was this kind of bizarre dream come true for me. Reuters did 2 articles, and Volta was accepted to Digital Catapult's showcase on spatial audio. I'd like to say that I had the self-assurance I needed to pursue this as a career, but the reality is you're going to need help. A lot of that help will come in the form of expertise, but a lot of it is also emotional. The first 6 months in particular were a very lonely process. You'll need reasons, especially as a solo founder, but even if you have co-founders, to keep yourself going during the boring, often Kafka-esque shit that needs doing to start a business. There's compliance and registration, HMRC, legal advice, financial modeling, nothing that really has to do with the creative, enjoyable stuff of producing something. And this is the first lesson I've really learned since leaving the program, which is getting other people bought into your idea, including yourself at times, is difficult. You'll need to use whatever assets you have, your own confidence, external validation, logic. One of the things that often kept me going was actually the simple belief that it was inconceivable to me that the future of music didn't have mixed reality built into it. So, being able to do that is great to keep you going, but it comes with a new problem. If you're doing a good job, you're gonna feel like an imposter. because this is probably the first time you've done this job, which means you've somehow managed to surround yourself by people who are better than you. This is a good thing, obviously, but especially for the first year. And even now, I still have my share of moments when, I look at the people on our team and I ask myself, why are these people listening to me? You're going to waste time, and that's necessary. Part of it is building relationships with people that you don't know how it's going to affect you. I literally met Bob Moz, the managing director of Techstars Music in LA on March 6th, like the day the world was coming to a close because of the pandemic. And I don't remember, and I don't even really know if I knew why at the time I was meeting him, but I took the meeting because I took pretty much every meeting. Of all the meetings, the email threads and the conversations, my first year, 95% of them didn't lead me anywhere. The 5% that did, though, meaningfully changed the course of Volta. Volta still didn't feel like a company at this point. For one thing, a tech company tends to need a CTO. I'd been paying a development team based in Pakistan and a contractor in London with experience in interactive audio to turn my prototype, this Frankenstein, together system that intermittently ran on high-spec computers into something actually shareable. During this period, I was part of the Rattle, which is an incubator based in London dedicated to music tech startups and musicians. And their CEO taught me the nuances of fundraising at the pre-seed level, which can be weirdly close to dating, actually. It takes a lot of resources to turn ideas into a reality, and it takes a lot of conviction to get those resources. So where does the conviction come from? It's essentially on loan. I asked that contractor to come on board as our CTO, but he was pretty happy as a freelancer. It would take closing the funding round to make that contractor feel like this was a risk worth taking. And it would take convincing the investors that I had the resources to execute the concept, to invest in us. It worked out, fortunately, but it's not like this will be the only time that I'll have to close that gap. In fact, the gap keeps getting bigger, but fortunately now I have a pretty incredible team to help me do it. So is there a big enough problem worth solving? Is your solution the right one? Are you the right person or people to solve it? This is all that investors will care about at this stage. If they can say yes to those things, even though the problem and solution will change, they'll believe that you can evolve things enough and see the changes in the world or see the changes in your tech to solve it. Investors invest in you and your team. They don't invest in the concept at this stage at all, really. So waste your time thoughtfully when you can. Follow what you're passionate about. Pay attention to where your attention flows, and invest in people, and they'll invest in you. We are releasing our beta to the public in 2 weeks. And I can say it takes you to make something cool, but it takes a lot of people and time and money to make something people care about and something that people actually want to pay for. And that's pretty fucking daunting, to be honest, but doing something people care about usually is. You'll fail if it's just a good idea that you think you can execute. Don't just start a company to start a company. You need passion or you will fail. So here's my contact email. Feel free to reach out if I can be helpful. You never know if I can be helpful to you or you can be helpful to me. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Alex. That was really insightful for anyone who might be thinking about starting their own company. Elena, are you here? Would you like to on your video and share your screen? Hi.
Hello, hey. Yeah. Sorry, 1 second. We'll try.
Okay, great.
Can you see this?
Yeah, we're good.
So I don't know if this will crash everything if I try to go into full screen mode, but let's try. Can you still see this or not really?
I think it's loading, but it might show up in a second.
Maybe it's paused. I guess we're maybe just gonna leave it at PDF. Sorry, I've a bit of issue with this.
Okay, yeah, that works. Yeah,
Okay,
it's full screen.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Elena. I'm one of the founders of AeroPowder. You maybe have seen me walking around the Dyson School from time to time. It's pretty tough to follow what Alex said. I think that was an amazing session with a lot of self-reflection. I don't know if I will manage the same thing, but I will try. See if that works. Yeah. Oops. So my project started off as an IDE student. So I graduated the IDE 2016. And I did something what most IDE students don't do, because they find immediately a job and work for amazing companies. But I decided to embark on a PhD, which was a really interesting experience for 4 years. And my PhD was mostly concerned with looking at feather waste. So this is basically the follow-up from my solo project in IDE 2. And the solo project was concerned with producing novel materials from chicken feather waste. The problem is huge. I guess you all love chicken if you're not vegetarian or vegan, which is obviously the way to go in the current age and time. But a lot of people still eat chicken, and it's actually the fastest growing animal-derived protein on this planet. And what you can see here, basically, it's going to overtake pork, or has overtaken pork last year. So it is incredibly popular. With this immense chicken consumption, obviously goes the waste. The waste is very, very diverse. But the biggest problem is feathers. And it is a huge issue because the material is very, very voluminous. It's highly contaminated, and there are not many disposal options currently. So my PhD then started looking into what can we do with this amazing material? How can we utilize this? Because there's this sheer massive abundance. So in the EU, we have 3.1 million tons of this material available per year. Feathers are actually quite amazing. They're like a mini composite material, so they're thermally insulating, they're biodegradable, very strong. They are fully biodegradable, and they're very cheap and can be sourced everywhere in the world. So this was my starting off proposition, looking at this material. And during my 4 years research, so there's a technical consideration, it was a very hands-on approach. So I basically chucked this material together with my colleagues into 30 factories all over Europe, and had a look what comes out on the other side. If the process is somewhat winning, if there's an interesting kind of result at the end, and there was also a lot of fail. So it was a real trial and error process with an immense learning curve, I would say. Not only what this material can be used for, but also in terms of how to deal with industry partners, how to deal with health and safety, how to analyze and validate your process along the way. So what Alex said, do you have an issue that is worth addressing? This is very, very important to keep you going, because it is a super difficult journey that you go on as an entrepreneur. So you really need to have like a lot of motivation, a lot of also technical statistical cause that you're tackling something that is relevant. So those are some day-to-day experiences I had. So obviously, I guess a lot of people have this kind of dream that startup life is in fancy offices, eating vegan muesli, having all for free and having fancy, plants on their desks. It's not like this. It is really hard work. It is dirty. It is messy. It is not what you're imagining in some cases, especially if you do a startup that is physical and that has a physical output and is process orientated. And obviously, if you go in the waste sector, this is even more extreme. So you're dealing with material that is smelly, that is dirty, that is going to stick in your clothes. You're going to be on a train and you're going to be covered in stuff that you don't know what it is. So it is pretty full on, I would say. So in this image, you see one of the air filters is clogged up during one industrial trial, and then we had to clear it out. And there's no one else who will do it. It's you who does everything in a startup. So be it cleaning the air filter, doing the marketing material, understanding legal documents that you don't understand the vocabulary, analyzing your finance, being nervous about your runway and your burn rate, all of those things, this is all on you. I highly recommend it because it has been an incredible journey, especially combined with a PhD. It's incredibly inspiring and you learn a lot. I think this is the most intense professional development that you can go on. Here, the other picture shows actually a test we did producing sustainable coffee cups. It completely failed, smelled horrible, the material was very bad. So even though I look happy in this picture, I was really not. So a lot of fails as well along the way, even though people like to tell the success story in the end. So initially one idea was, can we produce sustainable feather plastics? So it required, a lot of different tests with a lot of different industry partners. In the end, we realized, even though we can manage to embed 30% into any polymer, literally, to reduce the content of non-renewables, the material actually performed pretty bad, and we had huge issues manufacturing this. So our dream of integrating feather fibers in every plastic in the world was actually destroyed very early on. So we looked into a lot of different processes, and our goal was, can we find a winning application during all those factory visits that will offer us an application with 80% feather content or more. And luckily, we came across a really small Danish factory that had a novel revolutionizing textile process. And we chucked feathers in, as we did with every factory, and we looked what came out on the other side, and it was actually amazing. So we produced 12 different materials. It's like a bedding in different thicknesses, boards, almost foam-like materials. It was quite magical, this experience, and we knew we had found our application, and a lot of the issues we had experienced were actually not present in this one manufacturing trial. Going forward, we then launched a product which is called Plumo. It is 95% feather-based. It is made from mostly feathers that are clean and a biodegradable binder. It's also covered in a fully biodegradable film. And the great thing about Plumo is it actually outperforms polystyrene. And what does this mean? So by being better than polystyrene, it actually means that we can use it as a thermal insulation material for a lot of different applications. And you will also learn this, that a lot of people would like to collaborate with you, especially if you're a startup in the circular economy. It's quite trendy, a lot of people want to jump the bandwagon, but you will find that many industry collaborations with big guys are actually mostly a PR stunt. So they are going to request maybe some sort of a newspaper article or some sort of a project, but in the end it's going nowhere. So also what Alex mentioned, a lot of people are wasting your time. So you need to be really selective and see really what is going to be the outcome of this. Is this going anywhere? And this helped us actually to focus very quickly on the market, which is thermal packaging for deliveries. It was scalable. We could do it ourselves. We were completely independent from any kind of big partners, any agreements, any IP issues with big companies or similar. So this is what we went forward with, and we created Plumo, which is the world's first feather-based packaging material. This is the concept that we have. Obviously, we're solving a big issue, polystyrene waste. So our material, is at the moment manufactured in Europe. It is sold to several customers in the UK, and it is used to ship fresh goods, last mile deliveries to customers. So you maybe know HelloFresh or Gusto or similar. So it is a product that would address such markets. Also something that Alex said that I would like to also mention, if you're doing a startup on your own, it can be very lonely, very difficult. So I did this whole adventure with my co-founder, Ryan. You can see him in the picture. And I found him on day one of this project. And that is really important because you will come across a lot of problems you don't know how to quite solve. And it's really important to have someone you can discuss stuff with, have a second opinion, bounce of ideas, and so on. So I would certainly recommend embarking on any entrepreneurial journey as a team of 2 or 3. And also agree on everything, obviously, in terms of legal stuff, shareholder agreements, all the crazy things about company formation and so on. Make this all crystal clear at the beginning and then just go together as a team. What you can see as well in the picture is our little production line in Denmark. So you can see the feather textiles here coming off and then they're wrapped. So we have managed to automate most of this production now, and the factory can make 20,000 units per day, and we are scaling. So this is a small pilot line. And here on the left side, you see the feathers just being shipped actually. So you see being in the packaging business, it's enormous volume. So, you know, you're not making 1 or 2 little products, you're making thousands or millions. So that means also in terms of learning, you need to think about supply chain. Where's the stuff going to go? Or, you know, who is it going, how is it going to be transported? So again, there's an incredible learning journey that you will embark on as an entrepreneur that I can strongly recommend. Okay, this is now looking at future products. Obviously, because we manage to manufacture our feather panels, feather textiles in different densities and strength and thicknesses, the scope for those products could be quite big. However, you also need to realize that all of those need different accreditations, registrations, tests, and so on. So one thing at the beginning I would strongly recommend is to focus on one MVP, one minimum viable product, develop this fully, and then go with it, explore the market fully, sell some, get some cash flow in, and then look at other things. They are highly distracting, and in the end, they can possibly endanger also your venture if you're too spread across different ideas and applications. Okay, obviously this is all a team effort. It's not possible to do this on my own. So there's Ryan, and also there's a list of supporters. Very important to say, to this day, we haven't invested a single penny of our own into this. If you're incredibly rich and you can afford your own startup and self-funded, it's great. If you're a normal human being like we all are, then I would recommend exploring funding very, very early. This really takes away the personal risk of such a venture. And you can see, yeah, we managed at the very start to get a lot of people involved and excited about this idea, and this was reflected in our funding success. So make sure you can tell your story, get people excited, and then just go and collect the money. Okay, so that's it. And I think over to Daniela.
Thank you so much, Elena. I think a lot of us in the Dyson School have heard about you and AeroPowder, and it was really great to see how you guys started out. I think Daniela's only going to join us in 10 minutes. So maybe what we could do is get started with the Q&A until she joins.
Sure.
Okay, so someone asked, how do you find investors?
I found investors, my first lead investor came through the Rattle, which is that incubator that I'd mentioned I started. They had a pretty good network. The CEO who taught me sort of kind of the nuances of investing at the pre-seed level, he'd been involved, he was a serial entrepreneur. And so in addition to kind of knowing the nuances of what investors look for and some of the dynamics, he had a really good network and put me in touch with one of their investors. I think he is their lead investor. And so I had a really good relationship with him already. We were debating whether or not to take investment at all. We were hoping not to, because it looked like there was a potential to get some really big projects going, which would pay for a lot of our development. But then COVID happened, and it actually changed our business model significantly, and it required us to take funding. And since then, it's kind of also sort of changed our course such that we are now kind of becoming a venture company, meaning we're going to need to keep taking funding for the sake of scaling quickly, rather than having a more linear or organic roadmap to revenue.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thanks, Alex. Elena, was your journey trying to find investors quite similar, or how did it go for you?
So we just finished our crowd cube of 500,000. I guess there's so many different points in an entrepreneurial journey when you should and when you shouldn't, and when you want and then you can't raise investment. So to be honest, I left this always to my co-founder because I was more involved with the technical development. I can recommend to get funding at the start. There are so many competitions. Apply to them, get the money in, and you will be surprised there are not many people applying to those, and you're usually better than the competition. This is what I found out. So I would strongly recommend this just to get started before bothering with investors in your first month.
Thanks. Sergey asks, how has the concept of the product changed over time, and what instigated these changes?
So for me, like I said, Volta started as a studio production tool. Sergi helped me with this. Pretty much took virtual objects and calibrated the positions of the objects to the spatialization algorithm that Lorenzo in the audio experience department created. And over the course of the 6 months after graduating, I wasn't exactly sure what Volta was at the time. You think you know what you're making, you think you have a clear idea, but then in retrospect, you kind of realize that you are kind of fumbling around in the dark. There was kind of this I guess a mental model or a mentality that I had, in that if you look at the trajectory of music, at least people's expectations around music performance, that people's expectations are moving away from musical virtuosity and toward the spectacle, to the extent that like you go to a festival like Coachella or Tomorrowland or something like that, and it's literally one person in front of a black box with this whole spectacle going on. And so what I wanted to do was take the positions and the characteristics of virtual objects and not just use it to spatialize audio, but link it to all of the elements of the spectacle itself. So the music, the lighting, the visuals, all of that. And then when COVID hit, we're basing our the concept around live music in physical venues. So when COVID hit, there wasn't really a whole lot of opportunity there, and so but we had already built something useful, and it wasn't that hard for us to kind of invert the user flow. So instead of using VR as a control surface to control these elements of the spectacle, you could actually flip it so that the music and metadata from audio performance software generated the spectacle in VR and immersive 3D environments that could be output to VR headsets or YouTube or wherever. So that's how it evolved for me.
Thank you. Elena, would you like to share your answer to this question, or do you want to move on to the next questions?
I mean, we started off basically with an insulation product for houses. That was maybe like 3-4 years ago. And then the Grenfell Tower happened, and it basically destroyed any trust in insulation material. So this is when actually we had to pivot quite drastically from developing a house insulation to going to packaging for the food sector, which was a growing market at this point. So yeah, you just need to be flexible and see what is feasible as a two-person team in a way, and what is a market that you can actually tackle, that is not overly complex. It doesn't require millions and billions of upfront investment in machines and resources. So yeah, just stay flexible. Obviously with a virtual product, it looks a bit different. But yeah, so we had quite a big pivot actually.
Yeah, actually, like it seems like both of your ideas did change because of major world events. So sometimes it's like you just have to respond to what's happening externally, isn't it? Okay, maybe we can do one last one, and then I hope Danielle is going to join us soon. How did the course at Imperial College help you start your business?
I mean, for me, I started it, out of Imperial. Like I said, so when I first went into the program, like in one of the first weeks, they had a few former students come, and Ryan Yasin, Arthur Karabot, and Dan Copin, they had come in and talk about their experience and their projects, as not just their final projects, but their projects throughout. And I was pretty blown away by the quality of their work, and I found myself being like, not like intimidated per se, but I just didn't think that I would make anything that was comparable in quality and in technical ability to that. And so really, I mean, GID, I think more so than IDE is a little less rigid. And it's more like, if you have, at least at the time, I know that kind of it's changed quite a bit, but if you have a lot of, ambition and you're self-driven and you don't need a lot of structure, it's amazing because you're just given these resources to go and figure out ideas. I mean, that's true of IDE as well. I'm not saying that that's not the case, but like I said, I didn't think I'd make anything nearly as cool as what they were doing. And it surprised me, what I was capable of learning and doing and building in a very short period of time. I think it was an empowering process. I'd say, more than anything, I know that's not directly related to business. That's just more like, making something and being productive, but you need that sense of empowerment to be able to go out and start a business as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you want to know from me as well?
Oh yes, of course.
Sure. No, Daniela has joined, so I think maybe it's fine. Imperial is amazing, very supportive for all startups, so I can strongly recommend this. This is from my side.
Hi, Daniela.
Hey, how's it going?
It's good. Yeah, so we're ready for you to start.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, just in time. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Daniela, co-founder and CXO of Gravity Sketch. So I'm here today to tell you a little bit about our story, from where did it started. As you all know, it started at IDE, and then a bit of the story of what happened afterwards and how we have arrived to where we are at the moment. It's been 8 years already. It's gone really fast, and there's been a lot of up and downs. But I'm really happy that I've taken this journey. So it all started in IDE. I'm an IDE alumni, graduated in 2014. IDE for me has been kind of like one of the most magical places on earth. I think that's a place where you can really think about anything and try to achieve it, and it's really likely that you're going to, or at least think that you have everything that you need to be able to achieve it, which I think it's great. And that led us to come up with Gravity Sketch at that point, and know that we were really trying to push all the boundaries possible to enable people to create. And since we were in academia, we really wanted to push the boundaries, right? Like we didn't really wanted to do a product or a service that was a company after we graduated. So my co-founder and I didn't really wanted to make a company, not because we didn't want it to be entrepreneurs, but we didn't really want it to feel limited by what the market was ready to get at that point. We really just wanted to explore everything, and that's how Gravity Sketch was born. So back then, VR and AR were not a thing. Right now, you see VR headsets everywhere, but at that point, the first VR headset had just come out. It didn't even have controllers. Augmented reality wasn't even a thing. The thing that was closest to augmented reality was the Google Glass, which wasn't really augmented reality. It was just like a little screen that you had here. So we even had to work with a company in France that was doing augmented reality for the military. So it wasn't really a thing that people could use, like everywhere. But we didn't really care because for us it was more around exploring the actual experience that we wanted to create and create a tool that would enable people to create. So I'll show you a little bit about what Gravity Sketch is, because you probably don't know, and I've been talking about enabling people to create. So Gravity Sketch is it's a 3D design and communication tool that enables people to create in the most intuitive way by using virtual reality. And now we have an iPad version of it. So here is Gravity Sketch. So once you're inside of the environment, you can just think about different shapes and start making them. You have 6 different tools. We try to be really careful in how we limit the number of tools that you get, because that's all you need. The rest is your creativity. Otherwise, if we give a lot of tools to the user, then it becomes really complex and almost like a CAD software, which is not what we are. So you're able to create free form. You can create hard surfaces, obviously change color, edit the geometry that you have. You can import different 3D models into the scene as well, export it to other software. And the kind of the thing that everybody loves about this is that you can also bring other people inside of the environment to work with you. So either for creating together or for having a presentation around an object that you have created, which has been great for the pandemic days. Over the past year, we've started to get a lot of companies interested in using this feature, because obviously they cannot meet in person. All right, so how did Gravity Sketch started? And this was a sketch that we actually did at IDE, and it's a sketch that I still use in all of my presentations because it's the one that still holds true. We started by seeing that the future was going to be like a future where people were going to be 3D printing their things at home and designing them. But we said, okay, that's not really going to be possible. We are experts in doing 3D models. My background is industrial design, and my co-founder is a mechanical engineer. We all knew how to use CAD really well, but still it was difficult for us to create 3D models in a quick way, or really make the computer do what we wanted. So we said, okay, how is the rest of the world going to be creating these 3D models if they don't have the skills that we have? So how could we enable them to just create them? Obviously, we didn't want to create a software for 3D printing, so we decided to take a few steps back and understand what was important there. And for us, it was, how do you enable people to communicate the things that they have in their head, right? We all have 3-dimensional ideas. Obviously, people that work in the design space and the creative space, they have to think more about 3-dimensional ideas, but we all have them, right? And we all have something to say, but we don't necessarily have the skills to communicate them. We don't know how to use CAD software, or we don't know how to design in perspective drawing to be able to clearly communicate an idea. So how can we enable people to just materialize their ideas almost as if they were pulling them out of their head? And that was our mission, essentially. And through our research, we realized well, we found this theory, the theory of multiple intelligences, and it was this that became kind of like the backbone of our project. And this theory by Howard Gardner says that we all have 9 different intelligences. We develop some more than others, depending on who we are and how we develop, as individuals over our lives. There's like kinesthetic, mathematical, logical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, spatial, among others. But the most important one for us that we found was the spatial intelligence. People in the creative industry, or like creative people, designers, artists, have a very strong spatial intelligence. So they're able to see shapes, understand them, move them around, and just continue like adding to them and creating. But the interesting part is that the tools that we have, the software that we have currently, is based on logic and mathematics, something that designers and creatives and artists are not necessarily strong at. And the reason for this is because the people that create those software are really strong in mathematics and logic. So it ends up being a series of steps that you need to tell the computer to do, almost as if you were coding it, to create a shape. And that doesn't really allow for this creative flow to happen. So we decided that we were going to do something. We didn't know we were going to do a software yet, to do something that would rely on spatial intelligence to enable and empower creatives to create in the most intuitive way. So we went away and started doing a lot of research on how people communicate during a creative process, what happens in their mind when they're going through that, and what are different tools, different communication styles. And as you can see here, I mean, there's like people behind the 2D screen just like pointing at things, which is not great. Then you suddenly have architects pointing at, printed pieces of paper about a building where you're supposed to live at, as opposed to just like look at a little image and be communicating around changes that need to be done in a 3-dimensional object through a 2-dimensional piece of paper that didn't really make sense. Then you have the design studios where, I worked at Jaguar Land Rover, and the design studios over there are very similar to this one. And this one is quite old, this picture, right? The only thing that changes is that instead of having that table with the designer sketching on a piece of paper, now you have Cintiqs, like the Wacom Cintiqs, right? But the rest of it, it's exactly the same. So it's crazy that nothing has really changed. And then you have more of a, like creation, physical prototyping, modeling environments where you're also creating and using your hands and, the physical world to be able to express your ideas. But then, I mean, this was all great. We are designers, so we knew all of this, right? Like we went to see other people, how they were creating, not necessarily designers, but like marketeers, how was that happening? But we wanted to push a little bit further, and we said, okay, who else is using space to create? And we decided to go and study dancers. And we realized that by interviewing them and talking to them, that they also use Sketch to understand their ideas and to put them somewhere to annotate. And it was one of the main insights and takeaways that we had from the research that we did. Sketch is something really human. We all do it. We're not perfect at doing it always, but we still doodle around, right, to make some annotations. And even dancers do this. Cavemen have been doing it as well. So like it's part of our human aspect to be able to do it. So we decided to keep that as one of the key aspects of the tool that we were going to create. And then after, after doing all this research, we started, with all the insights that we gathered, we started doing certain experiments. They were super low-tech experiments. At this point, we didn't really want it, or didn't really know that we were going to use augmented reality. For us, it was more important to really understand what was going on in people's mind when they're creating and when they're going through this creative process. So all of the experiments were like really just low-tech experiments, just like really trying to push people into like giving us more insights on what's happening in their mind when they're creating. And through all of these experiments, we ended up having our 3 pillars for the experience that we were going to create. And these pillars, after all these years, still stay true. And it's something that we always make sure that we keep as kind of like the most important thing when we're designing anything for Gravity Sketch. So the first one is physicality. Basically bringing this natural sense of creating something, creating a shape, using your movement to have an impact, or using how we interact with the world as a way to interact with this tool that we were going to make. Immediacy, basically what you do has an impact in what you create. So if I move my arm, that arm needs to be creating something, as opposed to me thinking about an idea and then decomposing it in a series of steps that the computer will do, so that I end up having a shape that blocks creativity, that blocks that creative flow. So we wanted something that was immediate. And then the most important one, I would say, is a simple set of rules. And I mentioned at the beginning, we only have 6 tools. And this is a constant battle. It's not easy because there's so many things you can do with software, right? You can just continue adding things. But if we keep it simple, then it's going to be easier for more people to adopt, but also it enables and kind of like almost pushes for creativity, because you have these tools and you need to just figure out how to create with them, as opposed to giving you everything that you need. So, you know, the most clear example of like a simple set of rules is the Lego pieces. You put them there's one rule, right? Like you put the pieces one on top of the other. Kids can use it, but also artists can make like these crazy creations with them. And well, this is Gravity Sketch 0.1, as we like to call it. This was the experiment that drove the most insights to our development of Gravity Sketch. And the idea for this experiment, and as I told you, it's really low tech. It was just a little cube with the layers of acrylic, and you would come and like tell people, can you think about a shape? Decompose it in like layers, and then sketch those layers on the acrylic, then put them all together and move it around, and then it forms that shape, right? And we wanted to see if people could actually think about a shape and really materialize it in a rough way. We didn't really wanted to create something that would enable people to create something perfect, and this is something that we got also from you know, the research. We all know how to doodle around, right? We all create in a certain way, but somehow at some point in our lives, people like stop us from creating or communicating our ideas in a graphical way if we're not great at it, right? It's kind of like part of the education system that, you know, they make you feel bad if you're not a great sketcher. So we wanted to remove that element of fear for like just communicating an idea roughly. And this cube really enabled that. What happened later was that we wanted to create a cube that was bigger so that people could make a more intricate creation. Obviously, that took a lot of time for people to create because it had more layers, it was really heavy, it didn't really work out. But we started thinking, okay, so what if you could have those lines that you're sketching on these pieces of acrylic just stay in mid-air, and you only need one piece of acrylic, so that, you know, you just sketch on it and then you move it in space and you continue sketching, and then you only need one piece of acrylic. And that's how we ended up creating the first prototype, which is this one. After the cube, it's this one. We'd had the acrylic layer. Here, it was a crazy thing that you would move up and down, so it would understand that you were, you know, moving that piece of acrylic to sketch. We were using a pen, a Wacom pen. We basically hacked it all. And then at some point we realized that we didn't really needed all of this. We could just keep at this point we brought augmented reality. So it was really late in the process. Like we already had defined most of what we wanted from the tool that we were going to create. And the technology, augmented reality, was only the thing that would come, you know, to solve the idea that we wanted to create, right? How do we keep things floating in space and enable people to look at these lines floating in space? Augmented reality allowed us to do that. So after this, you would sketch here, and you would have, with augmented reality, you would see the lines floating in space. We decided that we didn't really needed this thing because if you start tracking certain aspects of the tablet, you don't really need to have like this crazy rig. And we started adding buttons and sliders and knobs to be able to rotate and move the sketch that you had on the plane away from the plane. So basically, if you wanted to create a shape, you would create it on a flat surface, but then move it around, continue creating, and you would end up with a three-dimensional shape. And that just continued getting more and more iterations until we ended up with this working prototype that had a joystick and a slider. And that was Gravity Sketch. So it was a combination of a software and a hardware that was using augmented reality to create in 3 dimensions. And this was essentially it. This was the headset that we were using from the company in France. It's crazy to see it now because it looks so old, just with one eye. But that was what we were using. So well, we graduated. Everyone, like the project, we put it online. We decided to just continue with our solo project and be done with Gravity Sketch. But then it became viral and everybody started contacting us, and Intel wanted to talk to us and Microsoft, and we thought that we were going to be like millionaires the next day. We started, we're still not millionaires, by the way, 8 years after, but we have had a lot of fun. We started going literally all over the world to present Gravity Sketch. So at that point, we decided that it was probably the right idea to continue pushing Gravity Sketch, because it wasn't just like this, everybody wanted to hear about Gravity Sketch. Designers actually wanted to use Gravity Sketch, and we thought we had arrived to a really good solution. But we graduated, we traveled the world. We thought, the next day we were going to be millionaires and like create a company out of it, etc. But VR was still this, like, and this is me, like still with my mouth open, like being surprised about like what VR was. VR wasn't where it needed to be. Augmented reality is still not where it needs to be. When we started talking to investors, they were almost seeing this when we were presenting to them. And they were telling us that we should come back in 10 years to ask for funding, because that was how long it was going to take for VR and AR to be commercially viable. And they were not wrong. They were maybe a bit off for like 3 years. So we couldn't really raise funding. We had to work part-time. So part-time, well, it was almost full-time doing Gravity Sketch, but part-time working at Jaguar Land Rover. And we were really lucky that from the show at RCA and Imperial, we got offered a job because they saw Gravity Sketch and they thought that our way of thinking and creating things was really interesting. So they offered us a job. And that was a great thing, because that was how we were able to survive many years, as well as getting some grants and awards. So that's how Gravity Sketch was funded for the first 3-4 years almost of its existence. But we were stubborn, and we knew that we wanted to create this. We knew that there was something valuable and that the world needed it. So we just continued pushing and really believing in our idea. At that point, we decided that we had to let go of the hardware because it was going to be difficult to follow both things. And there were already some technologies that were available for Gravity Sketch to exist in some way or another. It was hard because at that point we were coming back to using a screen to create. So it was losing a lot of the essence of the experience. But this was our way. We decided to jump and start doing it for iPad as a way to just continue, creating something that people would start using and continue being relevant in the industry. So there was more of an experimentation. And the only thing that we decided back then that would allow us to make us feel better was that whatever we created in this iPad app would be able to just scale or transform into the VR experience in a very easy way. So it was always being thought as something that was going to be used for virtual reality. And at one point, some years ago, we decided that VR was, mainstream enough for us to push the VR version. And we decided to do it as a Kickstarter campaign. This was still many years ago, 2016. 2016. And the campaign was a failure. We didn't really get funded. It was almost the last day it was actually the last day of the campaign. And we were asking for 50,000. We only got 10,000. And we had to just cancel the campaign. It was still very niche, like Kickstarter, you don't really find that many designers that are going there looking for software that uses virtual reality. So you actually have to have a virtual reality headset to use it. So it failed, we canceled it, but it didn't really fail. And that's how we presented now to everyone and to the investors, right? It was a market experiment. We wanted to see if Gravity Sketch was going to be mainstream and for everyone to be able to create, or if it was just going to be for the professional industry. Because at that point we were still pushing for this idea that Gravity Sketch was for everyone, because we all have ideas. We realized that yes, it's for everyone, but who have more ideas are designers in the creative industry. And through this campaign, we realized that there were a lot of people in the automotive industry that were already using virtual reality for visualizing their models. They were not using it for creation. So they started looking at Gravity Sketch really closely, and some of them were like the backers that we got for the campaign. And one of the backers was a designer at Ford, Michael Smith, that after we canceled the campaign, he got in touch with us and he wanted to really start using Gravity Sketch. And we started working with him and eventually started working with Ford. So Ford ended up being our first customer, which was, it was incredible. And at that point, things started changing a lot for us. This was almost 3 years, almost 4 years after we decided to create the company that this happened. And suddenly things there was a light at the end of the tunnel almost. So when we got Ford as a customer, we also started having conversations with Google, and they wanted to buy Gravity Sketch. And then around the same time, Wacom came to talk to us, and they offered us investment. So it was, a lot of things that were happening. When we got the offer from Google to be acquired, we hadn't gotten the offer from Wacom, and we were still kind of in conversations with Ford. So they took us there, they showed us their whole offices. They, basically interviewed us to go work there because they were going to buy Gravity Sketch and take us there to work. But they almost told us that they were going to be buying Gravity Sketch, put it on a shelf, and then have us work in another project that they were doing that was similar to Gravity Sketch. And for us, that didn't really sound right. We didn't really want it to just give up and sell the dream. So we decided to say no. We didn't have any money in the bank when we said no to Google, and that was a really hard no in an email that we had to send. But fortunately, Wacom came afterwards, and the deal with Ford closed, and then we were able to raise more investment with some other investors. And this was the beginning of really growing the company and creating a software that a lot of people were going to use. So we got funding, and we grew the team to about 8 people that were just essentially making it better, making the geometry better, to work faster, and pushing for the community to grow more. So now we have about 75,000 users in our community that are using Gravity Sketch, and we are working with 10 companies in the automotive industry and the footwear, sports footwear industry as well. So now Gravity Sketch is 25 people that are really changing the way in which design is done, and how we communicate three-dimensional ideas. And that's, it's only the beginning. That's the thing when you're creating a tool, that it's never done. and that it's never, that it's only the beginning always, and you can continue just making it better and improving it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Daniela. I think now we've just recently gotten VR headsets at the Dyson building, so some of us have actually gotten the chance to use Gravity Sketch, and I haven't gotten the chance to go down, but I've heard that it's really, really amazing and really cool to use.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, let me know when you use it.
Yeah, I really, really want to. So as soon as I can get to campus, I will. But maybe we can continue with the Q&A now until the end of the session. So if anybody else has more questions, just type them in the Q&A and I'll continue with the questions that we had from earlier on. So someone asks, what are the key characteristics of an entrepreneur that venture capitalists are looking for?
I feel like Danielle probably has more experience with VCs than I do. We're kind of starting to go down that route now because we did a pre-seed round all with angel investors. We just did a follow-on round to our pre-seed round. We're just about to close it actually, and like I mentioned, we're in the middle of Techstars right now, and so right after we are going to we'll probably start raising for a seed round right after, and that will predominantly be like more like institutional VCs. And kind of the way that I've kind of been taught about how to approach it is, fortunately for us, there's a point at which it's a good thing to still not be making money, because your story to investors is based around the narrative. The second that you put data and money in front of them, it just becomes numbers, and the numbers have to be really impressive. So the goal now is just tell a really compelling story. There's kind of phases, and those phases sort of tend to align with the different fundraises. So a pre-seed round is kind of based around a prototype and getting you to product solution fit, meaning you've made something that people seem to care about. And then seed round is getting from product solution fit to product market fit, essentially showing that, you've made something that is repeatable. You can either, accrue revenue or a proxy for revenue, which is users and user retention or time spent in app, whatever your thing is. And then you go to the A round, and it's like, you're expected to really be able to capitalize on product market fit. Where we are, we're still pre-revenue and to some extent pre-data, which is a good place to be because we can kind of let the story dictate things. So we have much more control over that right now until we actually have control over the story. So again, like I said in my thing, investors at this point just want to know, is your problem big enough? Is your solution the right one? Are you the right people to solve it? If you can kind of say yes to those things, angel investors, for sure, that's what they want. VCs will ask you about financials and projections. But if you're pre-revenue and pre-data, your overheads might be accurate, but your revenues aren't at all. Hopefully they'll be accurate by, within orders of magnitude or something like that, but even that could be off. So I don't have as clear an answer for what venture capitalists are looking for. I have a much clearer answer for what angel investors are looking for, but I feel like Daniela might have a better answer than that.
I think you touched a lot of like really good things. Broadly, you have, you covered most of it, and you're right. Like they're asking for these three things, but like, is it big enough? Is it the right product? And like, are you the right people? I would say that are you the right people to solve it is the most important one. You're right. After you start having revenue and data, that matters a lot, which for us, it was kind of like a pain in the ass, because we started getting users from very early on, and we started selling it just to survive. So we had that was working against us. but there's ways to just like make a story around it, right? Like, and then, you know, if it's not revenue, then, you know, it's like, how are you growing the user base, like at what speed, right? But the most important thing I would say, and right now it's something that it's quite important and everyone is looking at, is like, are you the right people? Like, they're not investing in your idea. And that took us a really long time to realize. They almost don't care about what you're making. they see you and they see potential, to a point that, for example, one of our investors has just invested in a company that they invested on before that failed. But they liked the founders so much that they invested again in them. That's how important it is. So yeah, it's just really making sure that you show that you're the right person to do it.
Yeah, thank you. And this is also about qualities in people, but it's more about, so what's your opinion of the most important quality of employees or a business partner when you're starting a company?
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
It's that one is kind of like top of mind at the moment, like, because we keep growing, right? And suddenly you get money, like if you get funded, you get money, you start getting some employees, and you just want to continue doing things and move fast, right? But we have done a lot of mistakes in like bringing people that might not necessarily like be the right fit for us. And it's really important to find people that are going to thrive in a startup environment. So there's two kinds of people. I mean, there's multiple kinds of people, but like if we would put them into buckets, one is like people that don't really need to be told what to do, and they'll just like, you know, take something and run with it and like try to figure it out. Or the other people that need a bit of more of a structure kind of thing. They're both great, right? But in a startup, you can't really, like, you don't really have all the answers. You're just making things as you go. You need people that will come with more answers as opposed to just questions. So that's something really, really important to think about. And then one really key part of it is defining the values of your culture really early on, and understanding what is it that you think is important and valuable for people to have as behaviors when they're coming into your company, and for them to really be connected to the mission that you have. And that's something key, right? Like, you don't really want people that are just going to be coming for having a job. You really want them to be passionate, because they're probably not going to be earning as much money as they could be earning somewhere else. You're gonna have to be compensating it with some options probably. So they need to believe in the dream if they're allowing you to pay them less, and pay them in options as a future thing if the company becomes successful. But you want people also to be able to want to have some a big impact in what they're doing, as opposed to just being a little cog somewhere else. So there's like so many different things that you need to consider. One important part for us, and it's something that we're still trying to figure out, but we've gotten better at, is when you start the company with your co-founders, or if you're doing it by yourself, you have everything in your head. Or if you have co-founders, you almost like talk without talking. You really understand where you're going, and you move like you make decisions based on that, right? But when you start bringing people, they don't necessarily have all the information that you have. They don't have that ultimate vision that you have. So it's really important to figure out ways to transmit that to them. And it all comes with the history of your company, what you've been through, and where you're actually trying to get at.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with especially that last part more. Like, considering I started by myself out of GID. I cannot like emphasize how many times I would be explaining something, and I thought that like I feel like I articulate myself well, but it's impossible not to take for granted things that and have been living with, and it just swim around your head. And when you communicate something that seems, like obvious to you, how little, you actually are. That's on you as like a founder with the idea to like really properly communicate what you're doing and why you're doing it, because it's all people, right? Like you need really good people to like Daniela said, to believe in you, to believe in the concept. You need them to get bought in, and if you can't get people to get bought in, you're essentially doing it by yourself, and you're not going to have all the skill sets you need. There's so many like I feel like I just got very lucky with the people that I ended up bringing on, especially as my co-founders. They're excellent at what they do, and as I said in my part of the talk, the benefit to kind of having conviction and believing in kind of where, you know, a direction for whatever your thing is going, and being passionate about that, is you can bring on, you know, that's what you need to bring on, like really talented people. But it you know, comes with its share of imposter syndrome, like a lot of it, because like I said, like this is my first time being a CEO of a company, but our CTO has been in interactive audio mixed reality development, which is a super niche thing, but he's been doing that for like 10 years. Our chief product officer has been working with everything from like startups to like, you know, Fortune 100 companies for 20 years. And our COO, he used to work in investment banking and then started his own startup. They're in the process of exiting now. So like all of these people who have incredible backgrounds, who are so well adept to do this thing. And then there's me, who's never done this job before. So naturally, like if you don't feel like you're having imposter syndrome, you're either, you know, delusional or you're not doing a very good job. Yeah, I guess just, I don't have an answer to like the most important quality in an employee, mostly because like, I just think that like I got incredibly lucky with the ones that you know, came on early. They're self-driven, they're incredibly smart. They've been going, I feel like if anything, kind of the question is like, how do you convince those people to come on? And to some extent, it's deluding yourself, like having a certain amount of conviction that really shouldn't be there quite yet.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a lot to be said for like how much we can learn from the people we're working with, especially when they're experts in things that we're not. Okay, so a question about competitions. Can you still get funding or win competitions without a fully formed idea or product?
Yeah, we haven't yet. We actually applied for an Innovate UK grant, and unfortunately, in any non-COVID times, we actually would have gotten it. But you actually specifically can have to have not a fully formed product for most R&D competitions, like Innovate UK, those kinds of things. They want to be investing in high risk, high growth ideas. Otherwise, they would just say, well, go out and get investment and just build it if you know you can build it. So the whole goal of these competitions is to pitch something that is experimental. But that being said, we haven't won one, but
yeah, well, I mean, it took us a really long time to win one. We had to just get better. Yeah, there's definitely a way to win competitions and grants without a product, like without a fully fledged product. That's, I mean, as Alex was saying, it's kind of like the point in most cases for Innovate UK, for example. But you do need to have, yeah, an understanding on, I would say more of an understanding of what's the impact that you're going to have with that idea that you have. So whatever you end up developing has that impact. And that's the most important thing. I think Innovate UK grants are really, really difficult to win. One of the things that we learned is that, when we were beginning to apply for the grants, it was more about like the big picture, right? Like Gravity Sketch, this thing that is going to change the world. And then we realized that they need to be more nation specific. Like, what is it, like the one thing that you're going to develop within this like massive vision that you have? And that's easier for people. So Alex, maybe that's something that to take on board, but like that's something that people that they would want to see more. In terms of awards, that's different, right? Then for awards, they really just want to see the craziest, coolest thing. Most of the awards are, they just want to show cool things, right? So that's the other thing. And I would say that for that one, we almost need to have the idea a bit more developed because it needs to communicate well. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we've got 10 minutes, so maybe there's time for 2 more questions. So one of them is, how long did it take before personal income was generated from your startup business?
Alex, you want to start or should I?
Sure. It still isn't. I mean, I've enough money to like pay our employees, but I'm actually still not taking a salary. I'll start taking a salary when we close our next round. Yeah. And it is a blend of, what you can offer people is a blend of cash, but also equity. The thing to kind of keep in mind, the thing that's interesting about that is there can be this mindset that, if you go to an investor, for example, or if you go to an employee, not an investor, and you say, we'll give you some blend of cash and equity, they'd say, well, the cash is more valuable, right? But in reality, if you are like, we're having kind of a talk with one employee about compensation at the same time of closing the follow-on to our pre-seed round. And the reality is actually, no, it's not. Otherwise, investors wouldn't buy equity. They believe that the risk is offset by the potential to do well. So in terms of paying people if they're willing to kind of take equity, that's kind of like one of the ways that you kind of need to frame it, is that it's an opportunity for like hyper growth on your money now. In terms of my own salary, yeah, I'll start taking a salary when we close our seed round and can actually afford a little bit more. So yeah.
Yeah, for us, it took us a really long time, almost 4 years to get there. But it's not usually, like, it's not always the case, right? Like for us, it took us a really long time to raise investment. But yeah, after you raise your seed round, that's when you start paying yourself and kind of like breathing a little bit. Otherwise, you just need to figure things out. Obviously, you need to start paying your employees before, right? So, and as Alex was saying, it's a combination of both. Our first employee, that it's now our co-founder and CTO, was taking so little money. I mean, now that he thinks back at it, he was like, what was happening there? He was, quite young and he decided that it was fine like that. But, we were lucky to be able to just have him for like such cheap money. But yeah, now we're after a seed round, and then like the next round that we had, we're able to pay ourselves and just like, have a bit of a more normal life and stop kind of like having the noodles and like student life that we used to have.
Yeah, I think that also like really touches on how much courage you need and kind of like determination, even when you're doubting the idea and even when it's getting worrying. But I think the fact that you guys are where you are now is pretty amazing. So we have 5 minutes left. Maybe we can do the last question of I think this is quite interesting. What do you really owe your investors once they give you money?
You owe them thank you. And well, you don't really, when they invest in you, it's not that, you know, like if something happens, you need to return the money or anything like that. Basically, they invest in you because they believe in the idea, they believe in you, that you're going to take that idea and, you know, make it happen and have an impact in the world and essentially grow their money a lot, right? So that's it depends on what kind of investor you're going for. So there's some investors that expect their return of investment really quickly, so you know, they just lend you money basically and like expect, you know, to get a bit of you know, a bit more that they would get in the bank or something like that. That's one kind of investor, but that's, you know, when you're doing a kind of like high growth startup, that's not really the investor that you're looking for. You want investors that will come in and just almost like put your money there, like put their money there and not forget about it because you need them, but almost, you know that it's a really big risk, and it's probably a lot of the money that they put in different startups, it's not going to do anything, right? A lot of startups are going to fail, but they expect one of them to just really, you know, sell for a lot or like IPO and then, you know, get them a lot of return of investment. I would say, I would turn like the question around and I would say like, what do you like, do they owe to you, right? Because at the end, they're giving you money, but you're also bringing them into your company. You're giving them a part of your company. So you need to also be mindful of that and select the investors that you think are going to be the most valuable. So it's not only about getting money so that you create your idea and hire people and like grow it and like put marketing money into it, but it's like, what's their network like, you know, what have they been experiencing with other startups that can, you know, serve as, you know, insights for you and help you grow. So it's more like, what do they have to bring to the table than what do you owe them?
Yeah, I agree with that. The thing that was sort of like kind of hammered into me when I was first looking into the process of what it meant to like raise investment was it's a marriage. Like you should treat it like a marriage because it's, you know, they're with you through the exit, you know, whether that means it's because you were acquired, you merged, you went public, or hopefully you don't fail, but companies fail. They're with you until that point. There's no real way to exit. I mean, you can transfer shares, but it can be prohibitively expensive to do that because of tax reasons. So you're probably not going to see people like selling their equity in your company until some sort of exit, which means that you have to choose your investors wisely. And one thing, we just had this seminar as part of Techstars that, you know, around raising, and they were saying like, if you hear, you know, anything really negative about an investor, if they're like, if they can be predatory or aggressive, if they just sound like they're overly active to an uncomfortable point, you shouldn't take their money, even to the detriment of your company. Or even to the like the immediate financial detriment to your company, because you know, you don't really I recently heard about like a story about an investor who's trying to force an exit, and they have of the company, and they have like a meaningful amount of shares to do it, because they just pretty much want out. They want to get their money back, and they, you know, they can do that. So so yeah, I guess that's the exactly what Daniela said, was it's not just about getting money, because money is money. Like it can, you know, there's no sort of quality to it. It's just money. But like what that comes with, the obligations, as well as kind of the resources, are dependent on the person who gives it to you. So yeah, I mean, you owe your investors information. Like you should keep them updated. You should tell them what you're doing, what your plans are, because often they're going to help you or want to help you or have resources to help you. And that's why you brought them on. But yeah, it increasingly, especially kind of where we are now, is kind of flipped the other way, is what comes with that money.
I think that was our last question. So thank you both so much. I forgot to mention earlier, but Elena had to leave, but it was really great having her and both of you come back and tell us your journey starting businesses. I mean, I know I personally learned a lot from that. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. It's great to see you
thank
again,
you.
Daniela.
Bye.
Same, Alex.